Good morning, friends and neighbors. It's Charlie from Charlie's Fly Box, and today I have a very special treat for you because I am just full of special treats. And today's special treat is a fly from our very own Max Boschen. If you are paying attention to our Instagram and social media stuff, Max is our social media manager, and he's in the shop every day, and a super fishy dude. And this is a fly that he came up with last year, and he likes to use it as a dry dropper rig, or in a dry dropper rig, and a pretty creative way of going about it. I like this little bug, and we call it Max's Mess Maker, the Triple M. He was going to call it the Calypso, and we put a stop to that right away because that's a dumb name, and because Max is himself a huge mess maker, we have dubbed this fly the Triple M, Max's Mess Maker. So I'm going to show you how to tie it. And we've, Max and I have kind of gone back and forth, kind of spitballing ideas on how to make this thing a little easier, more consistent to tie. And I have sat down and tied about 15 of them this morning. And I think I've got a pretty clean way to do it now. Makes it a little bit more streamlined. It was a little fidgety before, and now I think we've got through that. So I'm going to show you how we go about it. You can see it's got a super cool body with that little pearl rib in there. That's done pretty uniquely. And then a forward-facing wing, a little ball of poly yarn, and some hackle. So not terribly material intensive. It is a little tricky to tie though. So I'm going to start with a Tiemco 2487 size 14. And I was talking to Max about this yesterday, and he said he only ties it in size 14 ever. So there you go. I guess if you wanted to tie it in a 16, you could, but just don't tell Max. So I'm going to start off with some 30 Denier Brick Beige Nanosilk. And what I like to do with this Nanosilk, because it's so slippery, is I'll take the tag end of the thread and run it across my dubbing wax, and then kind of reel that back in. And then I'll start my thread, and I want to start it just a couple eye lengths behind the hook eye, if I can get a hold of it. Now I got wax all over my finger. A couple eye lengths behind the hook eye, and I'm going to make a nice thin thread base back. Now the reason I wax that, with Nanosilk, if you've used it before, it is very slippery and can be hard to get a hold of and get that jam knot started. If you put a little wax on there, it makes it much easier. And you can see I've wrapped that thread base pretty far down that bend. And at that point, this fly is pretty uniquely done. At that point, we're going to tie in a piece of medium Mirage Tinsel. And what I like to do here is just catch the tip end here, kind of buckle that around the hook, and then again, keeping my thread as flat and smooth as I can, I'm going to tie that tag end down, and then bring my thread back to the bend back here. So I'm going to leave the thread at the bend, and now I'm going to wrap the tinsel. And really I'm trying to just butt these turns of tinsel one in front of the other. I'm going to wrap forward to just short of the hook eye. So I've made a tinsel body coming forward. Now I'm going to wrap back again over that, so I'm making a second layer. All the way back to our thread, where our thread hangs at the bend. And when I get back here, I'm going to catch that with a few turns. I usually get a few turns in front, I'll sneak one behind it. And then I like to turn the hook. Let me turn this. I realize that just went out of focus for you guys, but I'm going to trim that tag end out. And then I like to turn the hook. And I think I'm going to raise this up just so you can kind of see what we're about to do here. So I've got that thread hanging at the bend, and you can take a couple extra turns, especially with that Nano. It's so thin, you can take a couple extra turns in there and not have really too much extra bulk. So when we were originally doing this fly and playing with it, Max was, and this is entirely Max's fly. He and I have kind of batted it back and forth, but this is Max's fly. But originally we just dubbed the thread and kind of spiral that over this tinsel. The very first ones had a tinsel rib, but it was too wide or it'd come off, so we came up with the idea to put the tinsel down first and then the dubbing over the top. And what I came up with today to make this even a little more cool and make a nice slim body that really ribs itself nicely. So I'm going to take that thread and coat it with a little bit of dubbing wax. And then from that point, I'm going to take some tan beaver dubbing. Found my beaver dubbing here. There it is. And this is Magpie Material, Stephen Hankins tan colored beaver dubbing. And you want to kind of loosen this up a little bit. But you can see with the wax thread, let me hold this where it's focused. I'm just going to, whoa, not like that. I'm just going to kind of rub that wad of dubbing up and down that thread. And this is called touch dubbing. This was a Gary LaFontaine thing back in the day. And if you don't know who Gary LaFontaine is, you should go look him up and you should get one of his books and read it. That was back when the world was ruled by books, and Gary has a couple of really, really good ones that you should read. So you can see I've just got that fur just touched to that thread. It's just stuck to it with the wax. Now you can wrap just like this and get a kind of a shaggy body. What I like to do is spin my bobbin, and I'll get this going. So I'm just rotating my bobbin. You can see that thread's twisted, and what happens there is that dubbing sort of twists up on itself. It'll stay ragged, but it cords up a little bit more. So we've got that sort of raggedy strand, and you can see it's a pretty thin, buggy strand of dubbing, all said and done. So I'm going to rotate my hook back, or actually, here, let me move this down. We're just trying to give you the best view possible here. I'm going to move this around a couple times just for camera angles. But I'm going to start this dubbing back here at the bend, and I'm going to cover that tie down with just a couple turns. And then I can rotate my hook around. And I think we're still focused, yeah. And I'm going to spiral wrap this with very tight spirals. And you don't really have to sweat if the tinsel is showing through, because this dubbing is applied so sparsely it's going to show through anyway. And I'm going to dub damn near right up to the hook eye. In this case, because I got enough dubbing, I am going right up to the hook eye. Let me slide you back down here in our field of view. Make sure we're focused again. So you can see that tinsel just sort of shows through that dubbing. Nice raggedy body. This is an old school technique that doesn't get used much anymore, and I think a lot of people don't even know anything about it these days. But you can see what a cool, slender, sort of raggedy body that makes. Really sort of a mergery. Really a cool technique, and fits right at home on this fly. So the next thing we're going to do at this point is we're going to take some of our Grizzly Bear colored macrame yarn. And we sell this here in the shop. And this is about a single strand of the rope. Depending on how heavy you want to tie it, but it's about a single strand. And I'm going to lay this in just a couple eye lengths behind the hook eye, and I'm going to anchor it down good and tight there. And then I'm going to fold it around my scissors in a horizontal loop. And I want this loop to just be about even with the body, like so. And I'll pinch that down again. And anchor it down with several tight wraps. Just a little loop wing. And then I'm going to come in with my good sharp scissors, and I'm going to trim these butt ends out. And then I like to take a few turns down over that just to kind of smooth things off. Now, one of the things I've noticed this morning tying a bunch of these is that the Nanosilk is so slippery because you've got so much stuff tied down at this one point. It's not a bad idea to put a little shot of glue in there, so we will put some in. But first I'm going to tie in my hackle feather. So I'm going to take a saddle feather. This is just a brown furnace hackle feather, and I've stripped a fairly long section off the base. And I like to tie this in on the far side, and I want to anchor it in good and tight. Tie it in on the far side of the hook with the inside of the feather up. So I know you guys are looking from the far side. You're seeing the outside of the feather there, but it is inside up. So when I go to wrap this, ultimately, it will be inside up. And now I'll come in and I'm going to take a shot of Starbond Thin super glue and just put it down at the base of that wing, just to anchor things down there. Let that soak in. Now for the thorax, I'm going to do the same technique. I'm going to take my dubbing wax and just rub it up and down. And sometimes you'll get some little globs of wax on there. You don't have to be super aggressive with it. And then I'll take my dubbing and touch it to that waxed portion. And same gig, I'll take this and spin up my bobbin, and that'll just twist that dubbing up a bit more. And I'm going to start this dubbing just behind the eye. And I'm going to climb up that taper right up to the base of the wing. And when I get there, I'm going to leave the thread hanging right at the base of the wing. You can see how shaggy and ragged that body is. So now for the forward-facing wing, I'm going to use some fine natural deer hair. And the amount that you use is sort of up to you and what your application is going to be. This fly is very caddisy, obviously, but it can be a lot of different stuff. Could be a beetle, could even be a hopper in these smaller sizes. But if you're going to fish it as a dry dropper, maybe go a little bit more hair. If you're going to fish it just by itself as an attractor, Max fishes this on Clear Creek, our local, or closest river to the shop, I guess is what I should say. And he likes a pretty good clump of hair for that. But in the case of this one, I'm going to go kind of maybe medium. So I've stacked up that clump of hair. And you do want hair that's a little on the long side, just so it makes it a little easier to work with. So I'm going to take this hair and I'm going to measure it a whole hook length long. And then right at the base of this wing, I'm going to take one turn of thread and then another turn of thread. And then I'm going to tighten the thread to flare that hair in place. Put one more turn through that. And then what I like to do is try to lift everything all in one shot. Lift those butt ends up. Get my fingers out of the way there. Lift those butt ends up. You can even pick up this back wing. Kind of pick everything up above the hook, like so. Now I'm going to pick up my hackle feather here on the far side. I'm going to lift everything up tight, and I've got my thread hanging right at that tie down. I'm going to take one steep jump right up behind the hook eye and maybe just a couple turns there. So now I'm going to pick up my hackle feather. I'm going to lift everything up here. This is a little tricky to do without my fingers in the way. And I'm going to start to do parachute turns around the base of both of these wings, both the deer hair wing and the yarn. And one of the things that I fought with all morning is trying to make these wraps clean and neat, and sort of thinking of the vein of a missing link, and trying to get the hackle wrapped in between these butts and the hook. And what was throwing me off is, conventionally when I'm tying a parachute, I'm wrapping the parachute or the feather from the top of the post to the bottom. So I was trying to wrap from the top down, kind of taking a steep wrap. What I want to do here is I want to go from the bottom to the top. So I'm going to go one turn at the bottom, put the next turn above it. And this is actually easier with the monitor here. I should have been doing this all morning. 3 or 4 turns, and on this last turn I'm going to start to angle down around my near side. So I've now got the hackle pulled out over the hook eye. I'm going to pull it to the far side. I'm going to come in and close my fingers and sweep all this hackle up. Then I can pull the tip of the feather out between my fingertips. Slide that finger back just a bit so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to catch the tip of that feather just behind the hook eye with several good tight turns of thread. Now what I like to do is fold that feather back again and get a couple turns between the hook eye and the feather. That's just to keep it from sliding off. And I've been looping that back in my material spring, and I can come in and trim the tip of this feather out. I'm going to come in with my whip finish, and again, from the bottom up, just sweep your hackle back, build a smooth little thread head there. Trim that thread out. And you can see, you guys actually can see better than I can on that far side. You always end up with a few little weird ones, but not near as many as the way I was doing it before. But if you've got a few strands of hackle that are facing the wrong direction or not going where you want them, old Dr. Slick will take care of that. So we're just going to trim anything that's facing down out of the way. So we've got a nice clean abdomen thorax there. And now finally, I'm going to pick up all these butt ends in my fingertips, except for that one there. I'm going to leave him because I don't want to have to fight with him. I'm going to push my scissor tips down in here and trim these butt ends off short. Looks like I missed two, so we're going to get rid of that one and this one. Then we can kind of spread that forward wing out a bit and puff up this little ball a bit to create some surface area, a little tint wing. I caught a couple strands there when I was trimming that, which is an amateurish mistake, but I'll allow it. And that is our little messmaker. A pretty cool little fly. Now, one of the things that you kind of need to keep in mind, this is a fly that you can dead drift. It's super buoyant. Between the macrame yarn, the parachute hackle, and the deer hair, it's got a ton of surface area and a ton of buoyant material. So it's a fly you can dead drift, but it's also, because of this forward-facing wing, sort of screaming banshee-like, it's a fly that you can skate and skitter very easily as well. And you can see sort of clink hammery from the bottom, just super generic, really mixed up, you know, very variable, I guess would be the word. Get you a little better focus there. Pretty cool fly design. I like it. And now that we have a good way to tie it, I think that's going to make this a little better. Now this fly is not commercially available. You're going to have to tie these yourself until Max talks Umpqua into picking this up, which won't surprise me a bit. This is a cool fly and it's unique. Yeah, I like it. Now I've got 16 of them. I'm going to put them in my box and I'm going to go take them and fish them, and I'm going to catch fish on them, and I'm going to be happy about it. And I think you should do the same, my friends. I appreciate you watching. This was Max Boshin's Messmaker. Triple M! Come in and give Max a big hug next time you see him. He needs it. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.